On episode 302 of the Tennis Files podcast, you'll learn about the most important tennis fitness training principles with Dr. Mark Kovacs. Hey, and welcome to another episode of the show. I hope you're doing well and playing a lot of tennis and improving your tennis game. I've been playing a lot more since the summit concluded a few weeks ago, and I've been playing in USCA leagues. Well, actually more so a league in Arlington. You know, not too far away from me, but a decent drive. But yeah, I had a match this past weekend that was really good, really back and forth affair. My partner, Ben, and I, who I was actually called David for the first hour and a half until a teammate told me about my mistake. We played really well. We played against two tough, I think 4 or 5 players. I'm not sure if any of them were 5-0s, but yeah, we ended up winning 7-5, 4-6, and then third set tiebreak 10-8. And yeah, we just, stuck with it, had a good first set and managed to break near the end. And then second set, they broke us, I think, early. And then third set, yeah, we just played clutch, especially my partner, Ben. He wanted me to mention on the podcast about a down the line slice backhand winner at, I think, 7-all, which was amazing. And the point before that, he hit a lunging lob winner. So yeah, just really, really fun match, and just glad to get the win. It was pretty interesting. I played 2 Chris's, one of the Chris's who I had played many times before, and he's a very good player. But yeah, just kind of lucky, the last point on serve. I took some deep breaths for sure. I tried to use some of the techniques that I've learned over my interviews and summits and whatnot, and worked out. I was able to get a serve in there, and the return went in the net, which was kind of a relief. But yeah, so just a little summary of what's been going on with me. But yeah, just been training, trying to improve my serve and get more reps. As the more reps that I get, the better I play. So I'm just more of that type of player. I'm not one of those who can just go out there and not play for a week and just play amazing. Need to get the feel going. But yeah, one thing that's been really crucial to my success has been my tennis fitness. And I did a really fun live stream with Dr. Kovacs recently, Dr. Mark Kovacs, who, if you don't know about it, you must know about him if you've been listening to me at all recently. Dr. Kovacs is a performance physiologist, researcher, professor, author, speaker, and coach with an extensive background training and researching elite athletes. He's trained many top professional tennis players, including John Isner, Sloane Stephens, Sam Querrey, Donald Young, Melanie Oudin, so many others as well. And Dr. Kovacs has founded the Kovacs Institute and the International Tennis Performance Association. He was also, I think, the senior director of sports science for the Cleveland Cavaliers. So it's just so impressive how you see the crossover that Dr. Kovacs was just so good at his craft that an NBA team decided to take him to lead them in that area. So really cool stuff with this live stream that we did. It was it's mainly a Q&A where we got a bunch of questions from the audience, and so I brought that forth for you because I think it's particularly effective to listen to the questions from the audience, which I read out, and then have them answer, because oftentimes these questions are your questions. So I think you'll benefit from them. So a lot of great topics on this one, including how we should adjust our training when we have physical limitations, which applies especially as you get older. How to develop power that transfers to your tennis game, how to modify fitness drills for senior players, explosive training drills, the best recovery methods, and a lot more. So really hope you enjoy this episode that's primarily focused on tennis fitness with Dr. Mark Kovacs, one of the best in the biz. So without further ado, here is my interview with Dr. Mark Kovacs. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this summit session with Dr. Mark Kovacs. It's always really a pleasure and an honor to have Dr. Kovacs on the summit podcast, anything, because he is just a fantastic coach and expert in sports performance and many other traits as well. So, Mark, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for all the effort putting this together. I know how much work goes into this. So thanks for, spending hours and hours helping to bring some great speakers together and talk tennis education. It's awesome you're doing it again in 2023.
Thanks a lot, Mark. And yeah, I have you to thank and all the great coaches. And I'm a member of the International Tennis Performance Association, the iTPA, which is what Mark and Mary Jo have created for us, which is an awesome resource if you want to broaden your education about tennis fitness. Really great stuff there, as well as Kovacs Institute. Mark, thanks again for coming on. We have some viewers coming in here, and I also have some questions that I can ask. And then obviously, viewers, please feel free to ask questions as well. And I think we're going to focus mostly on tennis fitness. But if there's like technique questions, I'm sure that'll be all right too. But so I guess one question for you, Mark, is how should we adjust our training when we have physical limitations? Because that's a frequent question that I get in my surveys and emails. We do have quite a bit of the 40 plus population, and they have injuries, or the mobility is lacking, things like that. I mean, I have that myself even. So what are some principles to keep in mind there?
Yeah, so it doesn't matter what level of player or what age you are. Physical limitations exist for everyone. You just may not see it as obvious with, say, the pros, but even at the professional level, very few professional players are able to do every exercise or every movement at the volume that you would like them to do. So you have to work around a lot of different things. So in general, you start at the most obvious. If there's pain, you avoid. You definitely don't want to push through anything that causes pain. That's sort of step one. If there's no pain, but there's, say, weakness or limitation in range or something like that, then your question is, should you be training that to improve that strength, weakness, or that range of motion limitation? And that is a discussion that you have to have usually with a knowledgeable professional who can guide you a little bit on, is this something that will actually make you better by getting that range back or getting that extra strength? Or is there something causing it that you may actually not want to push to that point because it actually may do more harm than good? So it all depends on what your limitations are. Typically, I always recommend players get a very good fitness screen or fitness testing battery to figure out where are you as a player. This usually covers strength, flexibility, agility, mobility, and these factors that can give you a sense of where you're strong and where you're weak. So think of it as a SWOT analysis or even a gap analysis, like maybe done in sort of business settings. You're trying to figure out where you are today, where do you want to be in 3 months, 6 months, a year, and how do you want to close that gap from where you are to where you want to be. But in general, most of the time when people talk about physical limitations, they know what's going on. They have a knee pain, they have shoulder pain, they've had surgery and they can't do what they used to be able to do. And in those situations, you do what you can do, work around them, try to make sure that if you are favoring something, let's say if your elbow hurts a lot and you can't hit as many, say, backhands as you're used to because the elbow hurts on the backhand, then you've got to figure out, how do I either rest for a few weeks to let it heal, get some rehab on it, get some treatment, and hopefully in a few weeks it heals up so that you can actually do everything full strength. Or if it's something that may not fully 100% recover, it may be post-surgery and you just are never going to get the exact full range back or strength back, then you maybe have to work around it. And we have a lot of different ways we deal with workarounds, meaning if you have limitations, you may avoid certain things, whether it's in the gym, whether it's on the court. You may just not do that thing that causes problems. But long-term, the goal ideally, like with most people, is to fix the causes of some of these problems and try to strengthen and create range that you can then do hopefully everything in the future.
Yeah, great stuff, Mark. And we do have some questions streaming in. Just say hi to a few people. Hey, Pete, looking forward to the summit. Thanks so much. Awesome to hear that. Peter, greetings from Canada. Greetings to you as well. Lucas, hello. Nice to see you there. We have a couple questions that have come in. I want to ask this one more for now, and then we can turn to some fan questions, audience questions, that is. And you do have a fantastic presentation. I mean, I say that because I've seen it already on the biggest tennis fitness misconceptions, which you won't want to miss. It'll be out on Saturday. And so it's so awesome to have Mark here on again today with this Q&A. But what is the key to developing power that transfers to the tennis court? Because you talked some about this in your presentations. I don't want to ruin it too much, but it's just about I think we're not really sure exactly what we should be doing. Like when we think of power, we might think of the Olympic lifts and things like that, or squats and things. But what is truly the key to developing power that will apply like into your tennis game?
Yeah, no, power is one of those elusive terms that are thrown around a lot, and many times people misuse the term. So we have to first define what we're talking about. When we say power, in the traditional sense, when you're defining the word power, it's really force divided by time. So it's how much force can you produce in the shortest amount of time. And the more powerful you are, that means that your force is being produced very quickly. So to do that, you have two ways to do it. You either shorten your time or you increase your force. Ideally, you want to do both. Increase your force while shortening your time. So one is a speed metric, which is the time metric. How quickly can you do something? And the other is a strength metric, which is the force aspect of it. So both, if you want to get really powerful on the tennis court, you have to get stronger, which is the force metric, and you have to get faster or use that force quicker than you're used to. So you're trying to develop power through both ways. Some people are more genetically predisposed to being faster, so they're quicker, but maybe they have less force production. Other people are really good lifting heavy weights, but may not necessarily be as good with the quickness side. So typically you have to evaluate yourself to figure out, am I more a force-focused person, which most people know they like to lift heavy weights. The people that don't like to lift heavy weights, lifting heavier weight will actually help you the most. So the people that don't like to lift heavy, those are the people that more than likely will get the biggest benefit from lifting heavy. So that's always the case. Usually the stuff you really don't like to do is probably going to give you the biggest return on your time if you actually do it. So that's sort of to set the stage on power. But practically speaking, the drills that we like to use the most are tennis-specific power-related drills. And those many times involve either bands or cable machines where you can do rotational movements at a very fast pace with some pretty good resistance. So the goal is to move weight quickly in usually rotational movements similar to a forehand or a backhand stance and trying to move some weight. And then sort of the go-to best practice power movements are with medicine balls usually, where you can catch a medicine ball, which helps with your deceleration or stability, which has to be there if you want to develop the power, because you need the base of support before you can release it. And then the release stage is usually when you throw a ball. And that's truly the power producing aspect of the motion. So we have to store energy before we can release energy. Just like in a forehand or a backhand, we have to load before we can explode. So the loading is the storing of the energy, and the exploding is the releasing of the energy. And the more we can release the energy, the more power we're going to get. So the goal with all of this type of training is not how much weight always you can lift, but how quickly can you move the weight that you are lifting.
Thanks, Mark. So you see some people in the gym who are doing, like slower sets, and obviously there's the principle of time under tension, things like that. So maybe that's why they do it, and I guess hypertrophy and things like that it could help with. But I mean, for tennis players, would you recommend that we generally not do that unless we're in some sort of a different phase, maybe like a muscle building phase?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So it depends on what you're trying to accomplish at the phase that you're working. In general, slow control lifting is valuable because you get muscle recruitment. You get, like you said, time under tension. So you're loading the affected muscles, usually for a longer period of time, which causes more muscle recruitment, which allows for strength gains to be had with possibly some muscle hypertrophy, which are all valuable at certain times throughout a training cycle. However, if you only do that, that limits your ability necessarily to develop power on the court because you're not training fast at all. If the only training you do is hit tennis balls and lift heavy weights in the gym, you're going to get some transfer from that heavy weight training because you're getting stronger, but you're not going to get the maximum output for a tennis player if you only lift heavy in the weight room with a lot of weight under tension and do it slow, versus someone that may do a third of their workout like that in the weight room, a third or in the weight room where you're sort of looking to move the weight relatively quick. And there's a lot of great studies out there talking about you may still lift heavy weight, but if your intent is to move it quickly, you get that power response or that ability to get the benefit of that training. Even though to an outsider, it may still look like you're moving the bar relatively slow. If the intent is to move it quickly with heavy weight, you get really, really good outcomes from a power producing perspective. However, we have to also be a little careful. Anytime you use very heavy weight or heavy weight and you try to move it relatively quickly, you do increase your risk of potential issues, not necessarily always injury, but you have to be an experienced lifter. You have to make sure that if you're using heavy weight with certain exercises that you have a spotter to help you if you get in trouble, things like that. So that's more of an advanced training concept for the people that are pretty experienced. And for most of the people I work with, that's what we do a lot of, because we're working with that person that, a 1% improvement could be millions of dollars. So they have to really go to that edge of performance. But like we know, anytime you go to an edge of anything, you have to be more careful, because if you do too much or do it the wrong way, you may fall over the edge. And that's something that we definitely don't want to be doing.
Yeah, definitely. Very wise words, Dr. Kovacs. So we have about, let's see, like 6 or 7 questions here already. So that's fantastic. So one of my favorite drills that I love doing actually is the MK drill. And Neil has a question about it. How should drills like the MK drill be modified for the 60 and over player?
Yeah, great question. So for the folks that aren't familiar with this drill, this is done on a tennis court, very simple to implement. You go from the doubles line on one side of the net to the doubles line on that same side of the net and back. So you sort of run, you try to sprint as fast as you can for your level. And if you go down and back, for a professional player, that may take about 5 seconds to complete down and back. For someone in this example who may be over 60, that may take 8 seconds or 9 seconds or 10 seconds to complete, depending on your level. So that is considered the first set, down and back one time. So the way this works, it's sort of a waterfall approach where you go up and then you go down. So you go up a certain number of sets and then you come down. In the way it was designed originally for elite collegiate and professional players, it was 6 sets up and 6 sets down. So the 6th set would take a pro about 30 seconds to complete. Someone who is a lot older and maybe not as fast, it may take them 45 to 50 seconds to complete. So my suggestion for that is, depending on your level, it's not always about the age on this drill. It's more about physically where your comfort zone is. So in general, and we do this with some junior players as well that may not be in great shape and just starting out, we usually start with 3 sets up and 3 sets down. So that's down and back from doubles line and back 3 times. And if they can do that in a session and recover well and feel good about it, then you take it to 4 sets. And maybe the following week you try 5 sets. So you sort of build up to it. So there's nothing wrong with the movement, because if you're playing tennis, you should be able to do the MK drill. There's nothing about the movement that is significantly difficult. It's just running down and back. So if you're playing tennis, you have to run that distance in a tennis point. So there shouldn't be any limitations there. You may be slower than you would like, and you may fatigue sooner than you would like, but you can build that up over time.
Awesome. Dr. Kovacs, I keep switching between Mark and Dr. Kovacs, but I put a link in here actually from kovacsacademy.com regarding the MK drill. So definitely would want to check that out. And I guess, with MK drill, obviously it's sprinting. Does it make any sense at all to modify it to be any other different footwork, like lateral movement? Do you ever do that with your students?
Yeah, we'll do variations all the time. So we'll do X drill variations of that. We'll do lateral shuffles. We'll do lateral shuffles with front crossovers at the corners or at the turns. So we'll use this from a drill standpoint many, many different ways. So again, this was designed as a fitness test originally. So that's where it sort of got its use case and the normative values and things like that. But from a training series of exercises that you can progress and regress and focus on different areas, there's a lot of ways to adjust it.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Let's see. Lou Cass, do you recommend any websites or resources that have fitness tests? I have an idea, but Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, no. There's a few different ones. So the ones that I've been involved with are the Tennis Fitness Combine, which we sort of put together 5-6 years ago, which was really designed for people that were looking to test themselves. And there's a whole series of tests on, some basic agility, speed, strength, range of motion. Very easy to do, low cost, no real equipment needed except sort of a stopwatch and a couple tennis balls. So that's very, very easy, simple to do. It's called the Tennis Fitness Combine, and you're really valuable, easy resource, low cost way of doing it. Then also, if you want to look at some other options as well, Complete Conditioning for Tennis is a resource out there that has a number of different tests. Some of them may require a little bit more equipment. And those both require relatively low cost and low sort of requirements to perform. We do some tests at our institute that require pretty expensive equipment, where we're trying to get at very accurate, precise metrics on some range of motion stuff, some force producing concepts and things like that. But to be honest, most people probably don't need that level of accuracy. You want to know what ballpark do you fall in? Are you in really good shape for this activity? Are you in moderate shape? The beauty about the Tennis Fitness Combine is it comes with all the normative values for different ages and different levels. So you can kind of see, where am I today? Where is a pro in comparison? Where is the best sort of level at my sort of standard? And then you can set, goals for yourself to improve based on various exercises that you can do to improve that.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Mark. And I think I put I was trying to put the link to your book in there, but we'll get those on your other page as well. So that's awesome. Thanks for those resources. Really, really great ones. Let's see. Leslie, hey, from Tampa, excited to hear from Mark. Definitely, Leslie, good to see you. She was at the camp with Gigi Fernandez a couple of weeks ago. Super fun at Innisbrook. And great to see her again. Dan, Mark, I am a high school coach. Would love your suggestions for running at the end of practice.
Okay, so great question. So for all the high school coaches, that or college coaches as well, they have the same challenges sometimes. When you've got a team setting, should you do conditioning at the end of practice or not is the question I would ask first. I would say, can we get a lot of the conditioning done maybe via hitting tennis balls? do like a 50 ball drill at the end of practice where they're running side to side. A lot of players enjoy that more than just running. But there's also some really important benefits of running for the sake of, mentally, focusing on a task for a period of time. What I always say, it depends on the level. So if they're serious tennis players, I always say you should be able to run 3 miles if you want to be a really high level tennis player. And if anyone knows me, I don't talk about long, slow distance running is very valuable for tennis athletes. It's not a major core aspect of programming for what we do, because we know there's better, more efficient ways to get results. However, 3 miles for a high school athlete is going to take them between 15 and 18 minutes, depending on their level, hopefully. So it's not a huge amount of time. So that's a very simple exercise to do. Unfortunately, many high school players can't even do that anymore. Like 25, 30 years ago, pretty much every high school tennis player could do that. Nowadays, you don't see as many being able to even finish that without stopping. So that's kind of step one to a lot of the things. But in general, we do most of it on court, and we'll use things like the MK drill. We'll do variations on that. And most of the time, how we like to do our tennis-specific endurance work is we'll use work-to-rest ratios. So normally it's about a 1-to-3 work-to-rest ratio. So think of it this way. If you do 10 seconds of running, you would do 30 seconds of resting. So that means your running needs to be at a pretty high pace. So most of the time we work up and down a cycle, say from 10 seconds of work to 30 seconds of rest. And then we would work up to 30 seconds of work with potentially 90 seconds of rest. And you would work back and forth in that ratio. And that allows you to get a pretty good workout in a relatively short amount of time that is somewhat tennis specific in nature. 10 seconds to 30 seconds, that's about the majority of long points in tennis. Don't get much longer than 30 seconds. In the high school level, it may be a lot less than that. You don't get many points that even go 10 or 15 seconds. There's a lot of errors, obviously. So, but somewhere in that range is pretty good. And for a limited time like high school, a 15-minute workout, maybe a 20-minute workout is about all you're going to probably get at the end of practice. So something like that can work really well. And then you could mix up what type of sprints. You could do, we do a spider drill, which is anywhere from 15 to 20 seconds, depending on the level. So that's a 5-ball pickup, sometimes it's called. And that's on the tennis court and you're running in different directions. And that allows you to really get a lot of bang for your buck, because you do change the directions. They have to bend down. They have to come up. They have to be agile. They have to change directions rapidly, and they have to maintain balance. So you can get a lot done in a pretty short amount of time.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Mark. So let's see. Snowy, great session. Any suggestions for training explosiveness on the serve off court other than medicine balls?
Yeah, so that's a really, really good question. Again, with the serve, there's a few different aspects. One is we want to train the legs to get explosive power. And when we're talking about that, is we're talking about the ability to quickly change from storing energy, which is on the way down, to exploding, which is on the way up. So if you're doing a jump, for example, the down phase is less important than the up phase, meaning that we want to make sure that we're going down, but it's the transfer of going down to going up that we have to make sure we're emphasizing. So that's the explosiveness. And always like to do a lot of single leg jumps, more so than double leg, because in tennis, as much as you think it's a 2-legged movement, the serve, it's really 2 separate legs working together, but they're transferring energy ideally from the back leg into the front leg. So the back leg is more important for the majority of the motion before the front leg gets whatever the back leg is allowing it to transfer to. So jumping from the lower body is really important. The other really good one is working on some explosive movements from the upper body as well. So that could be a shot put movement. So we do quite a lot with sort of weighted balls. a 1 pound or a 2 pound ball is really good to do sort of a shot put movement where you pushing the ball up and out in the direction like you would with the serve. So you're really trying to get that lower body involved, but then explosively pushing with the upper body. So those are some two pretty good ones. Then, although this is not truly an explosive exercise, making sure that you've got appropriate range in your thoracic spine, specifically thoracic extension, can allow you to get a little bit more range with your upper body so that all the explosiveness that you're developing actually goes through the right locations, and you can get a little bit more stored energy in the upper body that can release into the ball. So that'll give you a little bit more of that live arm concept that a lot of people want to get.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Mark. We have a lot of questions streaming in, per usual with you. Sparks Guy. Hey, guys. Between playing and cross-training days, there never seems to be enough time for recovery. Should rest days be sitting around or be more purposeful? I'm 66 and playing singles more than doubles.
Great. Awesome to hear you're still out playing a lot of singles, which is great news. So this question is a very personal response. It really depends a lot on your physical capabilities, on how you feel, monitoring your sleep, things like that dictates how often you should take sort of complete rest days. I usually don't recommend too many complete rest days. That's not normally the best way to recover. Usually a form of active recovery is better than just passive. Passive recovery is sitting on the couch all day and watching Netflix. That's probably not the most preferred way of recovering. Usually it's, going for a mile or two walk, getting the blood flow is one of the best ways to help recovery. And there's a lot of ways to do it. You can do active blood flow treatment, which would be, say, walking, things like that. You can do passive treatments, which are electrical muscle stimulators. You can use pneumatic type compression devices, which is like, Normatec boots or recovery pump boots or things like that. You can use temperature to help with blood flow. So that would be a hot tub or a sauna or a steam room. So all of those are forms of recovery because they all have one big thing in common, which is helping with blood flow. So if you like to play a lot and you feel pretty good, your body wakes up each day and you feel reasonably good, that doesn't mean you should not play or not do activity. You just may want to do a little bit more recovery type treatments at the end of days to help your body recover a little bit more for the next day. So it sounds like things are working pretty well. It sounds like you may be able to incorporate more sort of active type recovery activities or blood flow specific activities that can help. Also, if you've got the resources, getting some, body work once or twice a week is really valuable. Like that can be through a physical therapist or a really good massage therapist that can really kind of go at those problem areas. And everyone has those problem areas. It's those areas that always sort of tighten up more than others. It could be the lower back. It could be the hamstring. It could be the calf. And just getting that worked on with a competent professional can really make a big difference with this entire process.
Yeah, it's funny, Mark. I used to, if I had a couple matches in a day, I would just do nothing, and then I would wonder why I was still sore. And the only time it would go away was after I would do an activity again. So, really key that you do some form of activity, light stuff, the next day, as you mentioned. And you mentioned a lot of different ways to accomplish that on your rest day. Would also Theragun be considered?
Yeah, so Theraguns or the percussion therapy, there's quite a few companies now that have that. Is a lot of that is psychological. Like it's it's creating this sensation that sort of numbs the area a little bit. So you feel better immediately using it, which is not a bad thing at all. There's a lot of techniques that utilize something similar. It's, hey, how do we make that discomfort go away quickly? And this is a way that can make you feel better. But you have to then address what's causing that. It doesn't actually fix a problem. It's similar a lot to foam rolling as well. A lot of people like to foam roll. And it usually doesn't fix a problem. It makes it feel better for a short period of time, which is good. It's a strategy, but there should probably be something else that you do in addition to that to try to address the cause. It could be you need to strengthen an area more. You need to create more range in an area more. You may need to eat a little bit better, meaning that you need more protein in your diet, or you need to maybe get some blood work done to see, are you deficient in certain minerals that is causing you to feel sorer than you should, or certain things not recovering as quickly as they should. Because there's a lot of factors that cause some of this. It's not as simple as this is tight or this is weak. It could be nutrition. It could be, and a lot of the time it is, genetic predispositions to certain things that you may not even realize that is you're eating something that is actually not appropriate for you. And if you can figure that out and maybe remove that from the diet, you can feel a lot better.
It's very eye-opening stuff. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Mark. Lucas, I want to learn how to slide on hard court on my backhand side so I can do open stance sliding backhands. Any tips on exercises, drills I can do to get good at it?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Again, I don't know your age or level or anything like that, so it's hard to give a clear response. But with pretty much every high-level junior, collegiate, or professional player I work with, nearly all of them slide somewhat into certain balls on hard courts. So it is quite common now. In general, you don't teach a hard court slide like you teach clay court sliding. Clay court sliding is specific technique about where you position your toe, where you put the pressure on the ball versus the middle of your foot. So there is some real clearly defined technical work that you do on clay court sliding, especially at young ages, to teach people how to do it. So we spend quite a bit of time teaching that. On hard courts, honestly, what you do is you put yourself in those positions where you need it, meaning you've got to take time away from yourself when you're practicing, that it forces you in a way to do that. So you have to obviously be careful, because you want that to be sort of a natural looking movement. If you try to force it, bad things can happen sometimes. But in general, the reason you slide is because it's a time benefit. You can get there and load while you're still moving into the shot and hitting through it, just like you would on a clay court. So the premise is the same. However, you better make sure you have really good stability through that outside leg. So if you're a right-hander trying to slide into your backhand, that's going to be your left leg that you're going to load into. So you better have good hip strength, good leg strength in that wide open stance position before you even attempt it. So that would be my suggestion, is make sure you're training off court appropriately in that open stance. Make sure your adductors are strong. Make sure your glute strength is strong, and that you can easily decelerate into that left leg, because that's really what's happening when you're sliding on hard courts. You're having to decelerate, through a position, and you've got to make sure that you have the stability to do that. And again, it depends on the age here, because if you're young, it's one thing. The older you get, this would not be a great strategy. It would be better to just try to get a bit faster and get in position as best you can.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mark, I can't recall anyone in their late 30s or higher who I've seen ever slide on hard courts. I can't remember one. Okay. I mean, obviously maybe some pros, like, or semi-pros or whatever, but yeah. So yeah, that's good advice there, obviously. A lot of questions coming in, just like last year. Peter, why do tennis pros also have wrist or elbow injuries? They know the exact techniques and how to do the fitness accordingly, yet they still get injured. What's the root cause?
Great question. So you bring up a couple interesting components here. So professional players don't always have perfect technique. Very few actually have perfect technique. They have good technique many times, but they're so talented and gifted, and they've hit so many balls many times that they've adapted poor technique to be relatively successful. So that's one thing. Many of them don't actually have perfect biomechanics. So that's many times a cause of some of these wrist and elbow injuries. especially the wrist injuries that we see. A lot of them are due to some less than efficient technique. So that's one aspect. And then, unfortunately, many of them don't necessarily train perfectly off court. They're either getting advice from people that may not know the sport that well, so they have them doing a lot of things that can sometimes be actually hindering them rather than helping them. You would think they're the best athletes in the world. They'd hire the most competent, professional, best expert people they can find. Some do, obviously, but many don't, and there's a number of reasons for that. One is they don't know any better. Two is it's a cost. Good people are expensive, like in all sports, and sometimes the cost is prohibitive because they already have a coach. They may have a physio traveling with them as well, and getting a trainer who's really skilled could be an extra expense that they may not be able to afford. So they work with someone who's available but may not be the best at what they do. So those are the most likely reasons why some of this stuff happens. Then if everything is done right, which it very rarely happens actually, but let's assume it all does, then sometimes it's purely a volume, surface, and ball issue. So sometimes with technique, they may have great technique, but maybe their equipment isn't dialed in the way it should be for the change in surface or the change in ball. Some players don't adjust their string tension, don't adjust their racket weight going from tournament to tournament, and many times they should, because if you're going from Australia where it's hot and bouncy conditions, and then you come over and you play maybe a few tournaments on a slower hard court that doesn't bounce as high in cooler conditions, you definitely should have a different string tension, and the weight of the racket should be adjusted as well. So I do a lot of work in golf and baseball, and they do a much better job with equipment in most of those sports in adjusting to what's happening. So tennis, most of the players don't dial it in that specifically. They'll usually make some mild adjustments on string tension, some of the players, but some won't. But very few change their racket weights based on conditions. Yeah. And going forward, they will be. This will be a change that in 10 years, we'll look back and we'll say, why didn't the players 10 years earlier do this? Because we know a lot, but a lot of the times the players don't. So that's one of the issues. And then the third big one is, unfortunately, the tennis balls have a lot to do with this sometimes. If the balls fluff up a lot, and some of them do, you have to swing faster to get the same outcome. So sometimes the balls wear out sooner than they should, and that is potentially a bit of a cause as well. So it's multi-factorial as to why you may see some of these issues, but don't think the pros do everything perfectly. I think that being around them for nearly 20 years, I can tell you for certain that most of them don't take care of all the little details as well as they should. And it's not their fault necessarily. It's usually the people around them and the advice they're getting and things like that. You know, tennis players aren't meant to be knowledgeable in all these areas. They're meant to hopefully hire people that are knowledgeable in these areas and that can kind of help guide them through that process.
Really fascinating stuff. There's so many factors that one can not get correctly and then have injuries because of that. I was curious with the changing of the weights. I mean, you know, there's some rackets these days that I guess you can insert weight into the like the butt cap is interchangeable with the weights and stuff. But how do most pros do it? Do they have like different rackets that are weighted differently, or is it like the lead tape, or how do they do it?
It's great. I mean, it depends. So, you know, some pros will, during the preseason, spend a lot of time testing out stuff, and they'll usually gravitate to a racket and weight and a distribution of weight, which is even more important. Is it head heavy, head light, evenly balanced? Where in the frame is the weight distributed? And then if they're a high-level pro, many of the times the actual racket companies will add the weight in the frames, and then that'll be their racket for the rest of the year, and they'll just send them frames that are based on those specs. Many pros, unless they're at the top of the level, don't have that type of service. Many of them will have to add lead tape at certain parts of the frame where they want that to be distributed. There's a few companies that this is what they do for a living, is they customize rackets. Many of you may be familiar with various companies that do that. However, most of the time, a lot of it is based on player feel still. How does that feel? I felt like I could hit that one better, or I could get the tip of the racket through the ball. At the highest levels, what most of the good players and good coaches are looking for is they're looking for specific shots. Like, let's say a specific shot that you want to hit a cross-court backhand. Typically, to do that, you may want to have a little extra weight in one side of the racket, because that'll allow the tip to come through on the backhand side better, and that'll allow you to dip the ball cross-court sooner. So for certain matchups even, you may have a certain racket. And this is, usually for players that are, if you've got a certain matchup that the Nadal-Federer matchup, for example, there were certain patterns in that matchup that everyone knew what the other player was trying to do. And if they could do it a little bit better, it would give them an advantage. I remember when Andre Agassi used to play, he had a specific shot that he knew if he could open up the court with his cross-court backhand, that would set up everything else in the point against a Sampras or one of his biggest competitors. So that was his most important shot. As much as we think of his return of serve or his forehand as being as big as it was the cross-court roll backhand, which had to be perfect. And his equipment was dialed in for that purpose. So those are the kind of little details that become really important the higher up you go in the game.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. Let's see. Pete, isn't one of the keys how quickly stored power can be released? Can the speed be increased in older individuals without increasing injury?
Yeah, you're 100% right. It is about how quickly can you release whatever stored energy you have. That's why jumping and explosive movements, plyometrics and power movements are recommended so much. Obviously, the older you are, the more at risk you potentially are to something happening if you're going above and beyond what your body can handle. So progressive overload is the number one thing you have to think about, meaning that if you haven't done a lot of jumps or plyometrics or things like that, don't go out there tomorrow and start doing a ton of jumps. That's a bad idea. What you would do, though, is whatever you did last week, you may add 2, 3, 4 jumps this week to see how the body responds. Do just enough, which is a little bit, to see how you feel the next day and track what you're doing. If you could do 3 jumps today, and that could be as simple as I'm just going to jump forward as far as I can and land on my feet. I'm not jumping up on a box. I'm not doing single leg anything. I'm just jumping forward. It could be 6 inches. It could be a foot. It doesn't have to be very far. It's just enough to see where are you today, and then progressively overload every 2 days. Instead of doing 6 inches today, in 2 days, you may try for a foot. If you can do a foot, you may try for a 1.25 feet. So everyone's different, especially as you're getting older, but the more explosive type movements you can do, the better it is for your tennis game. But even more so than that, there's so much research now that the older you are, the more benefits you get actually out of explosive type movements. They may not look super explosive if someone took a video of you. You still may be looking like you're moving not as fast as a 20-year-old, but it's the intent that is really important. The goal is to try to get that nervous system firing faster from the brain to the muscle. And there's hundreds of great studies that have shown how many benefits older adults get from doing some type of power or plyometric type movements.
Yeah. Awesome. Very important. Azair, hello. Recovery for adult rec players who don't have access to advanced techniques like the pros do.
Yeah, so low cost, zero cost, basically options are eat really well, first off. So a lot of protein in the diet is vital. Make sure you drink a lot of fluids, a lot of water, a lot of fluids. Sleep 8, 9, 10 hours, whatever you can get, So those three things are pretty much, nearly free within your sort of lifestyle. And then the fourth big one is, how do we get more blood flow to the area? And the cheapest way of doing that is hot and cold showers. So if you've got a shower access and you've got hot water, you do an alternate shower protocol, which is a hot-cold shower protocol. So you do about a minute in hot water in the shower, as hot as you can handle comfortably. Don't burn yourself, but make it a hot shower, and then turn the hot water off, and then go in the cold for 30 seconds. So normally I recommend do, about a 6 to 8 rotations of that. That's close to 10 minutes, give or take, in the shower. And that will do a great job of pumping blood in and out. So the hot water, what it does is it helps, bring blood to the area. And then the cold water, what it does is it keeps it there. So you get a vasodilation with the hot water, you get a vasoconstriction with the cold water. And then when you vasodilate again, so you turn the hot water back on, you get a huge rush of blood back in and out. So you get this continuous pumping type of action, and you just move blood around very rapidly. And if you do those 4 things, you take care of a lot with pretty much no cost. You don't have to leave the house. You don't have to do anything different. That's, I would say, is the lowest cost, easiest protocol that really doesn't cost you anything.
Wow. That is very important stuff. Love hearing that. Thanks a lot for that recovery protocol. That's awesome. Leslie, so referring back to what you mentioned towards the top of the hour, so 1/3 slow and steady, heavy, 1/3 moving heavy weights quickly. What else to round it out? So
yeah, great question. So if you're doing 1/3 slow and steady or heavy, kind of you're trying to get mass, you're trying to lift pretty heavy. 1/3 moving pretty quick, so you're doing your plyometrics or power activities. And then the other 1/3, for most people, especially the older you get, the mobility becomes vital. So 1/3 on mobility. So looking at range of motion, making sure that we're getting our hips predominantly have as much range as they can, making sure our ankle range of motion is a focus, and then making sure we get good thoracic extension, which is really, really important for shoulder function as well as when you serve. So if you can focus on those areas as well as the shoulder, especially internal rotation of the shoulder, those are the sort of main areas on mobility. If you can get your hips, especially internal rotation of the hips, if you can improve that range of motion, ankle range of motion, so dorsiflexion is the term typically that we're trying to improve. Then you got thoracic extension, and then you've got internal shoulder rotation. So if you hit on those sort of 4 or 5 areas from a mobility standpoint, along with the slow and steady sort of heavy lifting, and then the more power focused lifting, that's a pretty good off-court routine in the gym or in the weight room.
Gotcha, Mark. Does something like yoga, like a standard yoga class, does this hit on most of those aspects, or would you recommend like a different, or I guess customized is obviously the best, but what about people who go to yoga? Is that help?
So yoga is like massage or is like fitness training. It depends on what you're actually doing in the class. Like the concept is great. The range of motion, the mobility, all the stuff that yoga does is really good. But if you do the wrong exercises, it can actually create more of an imbalance than you already need. So you've just got to be a little careful. Ideally, go to a yoga instructor that has experience with tennis. That's the best. Or go to a flexibility class that may not be yoga specifically, but it may be mobility or flexibility with a sports focus, predominantly with a tennis focus. That would be the ideal. So we love yoga classes if they're taught by the right people. So again, random yoga exercises sometimes actually can do more harm than good, because like everything else, you just don't want to overstretch certain areas that may not be ready for it. But in general, yoga has a lot of great benefits that can be incorporated.
Awesome. Great stuff. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to find where I was. All right, let's just go with this one for now, and I'll backtrack. But Crystal, can you talk about how grip size relates to wrist and elbow pain?
Yeah, so really good question. So at the pro level, grip sizes have got smaller and smaller over the years in general. Part of the reason is the wrist becomes more engaged the smaller it is because you're able to maneuver the frame a little bit quicker. So as the frames have got a bit lighter, so as the grip sizes typically, that allows them to use their wrist, get a little more lag. That's the reason for the smaller grip sizes. So you are stressing the wrist more with a smaller grip because you can get more lag, you can get more positioning from that standpoint. So that's the negative with a smaller grip. A bigger grip, you're not going to get as much lag, as much wrist involvement, but you typically are going to get possibly a bit more elbow related discomfort if the grip's too big and your grip strength isn't where it needs to be. So it's sort of you've got issues both ways if you don't train for it. If you just pick up a racket randomly and the grip's too big, you're more than likely going to have some forearm elbow type challenges. If the grip's too small and you've got pretty fast swing speed with utilizing your wrist a lot, you potentially could have some wrist related issues. So you have to sort of understand your technique. You have to understand your swing speed because that plays a role in this a lot. And then you have to evaluate your grip size. There used to be some general rules back 40 years ago, 30 years ago, when you'd buy a racket, you'd sort of figure out your grip size based on how much room there was between your pinky finger and the base of your hand. And if there was more than about 2 fingers room, that meant the grip was too big. If there was less than 1 finger grip, usually that means the grip was too small. That was a rule of thumb recommendation 30, 40 years ago when pretty much everyone had leather grips. That doesn't necessarily hold now because of how light the rackets are and how flexible the rackets are and how quick the swing speeds are. So now there isn't it's not as simple to pick a grip size anymore. You have to evaluate the player's technique, their age, their swing speed, any prior injuries they may have had, and also what string they're using. Because if they're using a very spinny, poly-focused string, they're more than likely going to have a bit more wrist and they're going to have a bit more lag on their strokes. So that changes possibly the grip size as well. So when we look at that and talk to coaches and players about how to pick a specific frame, those are the things we sort of go through. We go through a little checklist of things about their technique, about what they're trying to accomplish, about their swing speed, and then you can make an informed decision. So it's, like everything else, there are rules of thumb for the average person to follow, but the more into this you get, the more complex it can get as to what may be most appropriate for you.
Yeah, definitely, Mark. And I was demoing a bunch of rackets, and it seemed like even, different brands, like the grip felt different, some were more rounder than the others as well. And so it was very interesting. So you definitely do need to.
No, it's a great point. I mean, a lot of the grips have intellectual property on their grip designs. So there is some patents on grip the way it's designed, how many corners they have on it, how rough the corners are, how rounded the corners are. So that's why you see, say, Head has a very different grip shape than just about every other racket. Some are more rounded, like Wilson's, things like that. So that isn't necessarily good or bad. If you do find a grip that you don't really love, you can always change out the size of the grip. So you can get them customized to a different grip shape that maybe feel better for your hand. The challenge also when you do change grips sometimes, or you change frames, sometimes you do get a few blisters the first week or two until your hand adjusts to the new style of the grip.
Yeah, another great point. Awesome. Thanks, Mark. So here we go. In terms of aerobic, anaerobic fitness development, I do short sprints up the hill to develop my ATP PC energy system. Is this sufficient or should I do something else?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So short sprints up a hill are really good for leg acceleration, especially. The hill causes a bit of a resistance. So running uphill is more resistance than running on flat ground. So that requires more force into the ground per step. So there's some definite value in that. Depending on how short it is, if it's less than about 10 seconds, that's where you really get the biggest bang for the buck for the ATP PC system. So if you're doing short sprints around 10 seconds or less, that's really good. The question is, where do you feel your limitations are on court? Is it because that's a bit more speed focused training in general with what you're describing? You're trying to improve your first 2, 3, 4 steps for acceleration. Because if you don't give yourself enough rest on those, then it just turns into a more of a conditioning workout. Let's say we did that 10-second sprint up a hill, and then you sort of jog back down, and then you do it again without much rest. So it's 10 seconds up, maybe 15 seconds down, and you repeat that 20 times. That's not a sprints workout. That's not really an ATP PC workout. That's really an aerobic workout because your heart rate never drops. If you're doing 10 seconds on, 10 to 15 seconds off, that's nearly a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio. So your heart rate stays pretty high the entire time. It's not a bad workout. It's actually a pretty good, really good conditioning workout, trying to get the lungs and the legs to handle more of an aerobic environment. So that would be my question is the goal to improve your acceleration? If it is, then you need to do 10-second sprint and maybe 60 seconds rest. So you give yourself plenty of recovery time between each sprint. If your goal is to do intermittent sort of sprints for tennis-specific endurance, for say, that's the purpose, then you may do a 1-to-2 work-to-rest ratio, which is pretty tough. 10 seconds up the hill, 20 seconds recovery, do it again, do that 20 times. That's going to be a pretty significant conditioning session. So it just depends on what you're trying to work on from that perspective. And in general, it's probably not enough if you're trying to train for your entire tennis conditioning. If you're just trying to train anaerobic, so ATP PC, it's probably good. But if you're trying to do conditioning as well, you may need to add something else to the mix.
Gotcha. Thanks, Mark. Let's see what we got here. Hello from Moko, just got off work. Cool. Hope you're enjoying. Verdell. Oh, well, I think you figured that out, Verdell. Peter Meribon using his best NPR voice tonight. Thank you, Peter. I try. Let's see. Jay, look, does yoga and Theragun device use help recover? I think we talked, we talked some about that. Any other closing thoughts on that?
Yeah, so in general, yoga is mobility and blood flow. So yes, anything that helps with mobility and blood flow is going to help from a recovery standpoint. Theragun or any of the percussion devices that are out there doesn't necessarily help with recovery per se. You get a little bit of blood flow to the area. You get a bit of what's called an analgesic effect because of the vibration, the percussion that occurs. So you lose that sensation at the skin level of whatever it's touching. So you stop doing it and you actually feel better because you don't feel it anymore. But has it actually improved whatever the issue is? Typically, you need to do something in addition to that to help with the specific tightness or things like that. So there are some probably, I would say, slightly better options if you're truly just focused on recovery. But because they're so easy to travel with and they make you feel good, most people will have that in their bag or at their house because it's easy to implement. So it means it's a useful device. It just may not be your only form of recovery.
Yeah. Gotcha. Thanks, Mark. Jamie, I'm 36 and short 4'11", but I've always been slow and intermittently get shin splints. Any recommendations on fitness priorities to go along with all the footwork I've been trying to learn?
Okay. Yeah, really, really good question because you've got two things it looks like you're trying to get better at. You're trying to get faster. So that means we have to do a lot of things in the short duration, high recovery environments, meaning that go as fast as you can and then let yourself fully recover. Because if you don't let yourself fully recover, you can't use full on effort for the next set or next rep. So you may be doing a lot of the right stuff, but you may be a little too tired while you're doing it, meaning that you're going at 80% of your maximum because you've never fully recovered. So if you're truly trying to get faster, you really have to train like a sprinter, which is do 10 seconds of work and rest 3 minutes. I mean, that's what sprinters do. They'll run fast for 10 seconds and then they'll rest for 3 to 5 minutes. Realistically, most people aren't willing to do that because that'll take you an hour, 2 hours to do a workout. And most people aren't going to give up that much time. But conceptually, that's what you want to focus on. Also, you want to do your sprint work and speed work when you're the freshest in the day. Early in the day, before your tennis practice is the best time to do that because your nervous system is the freshest and the signal from the brain to the muscle is moving as quick as it possibly can at that time when you're fresh. So try to make some adjustments on that. The shin splints question, so that could be due to a couple different things. I do a bone density test to see where you're at from that. Because there may be some nutrition things you may be able to do, which helps possibly. If it's just a training thing, maybe you're overtraining or training on environments or surfaces that put a lot of impact through that. And then we have a whole kind of shin splint protocol we use with a lot of our athletes, especially our female athletes. It's more pronounced in female athletes than in male athletes. And it has a lot to do with anterior tibialis strengthening, which is the muscle, the main muscle on the front of the shin that helps to support it. We do a lot of ankle exercises as well, calf exercises, ankle strengthening exercises to try to build up the surrounding muscles to protect the bone or protect. And when you say shin splints, it all depends. Do you truly mean the bone is getting inflamed, or is it the anterior tibialis muscle, which is just getting a little fatigued and it's getting tired, which makes you feel like discomfort there? So those would be sort of the priorities when you're talking about the couple of things you're looking to work on.
Gotcha. Very interesting stuff, Mark. I just want to double check. Do you have a 9 by any chance? 9 p.m. Anything?
No, I'm okay. I can continue.
Okay, appreciate it. It's a lot of questions. It's fun though. So this is a cool one actually. I forgot if I asked you this on our podcast interview a while back, Mark. Probably did. But what majors/education did you have to do at college to get a job like yours, Dr. Kovacs? Being an expert in fitness training, especially tennis, seems like the dream job.
Yeah, so no, it's a great question. I was a player first. Played college, won an NCAA title, played professionally for a short time, and then got pretty badly injured, shoulder problems, shoulder surgery, stuff like that. So this was 25 plus years ago now. So got into this entire field by trying to understand what happened to me and then hopefully help people not have it happen to them. So went into the whole field of exercise science, which was sort of that covers anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, motor learning, psychology. So you sort of get a good rounding of everything at the undergrad level. And then you go on to the master's level where I emphasize physiology and biomechanics were the two I really focused in on. And same when I did my PhD. So you sort of go through that pipeline. And as you go through the education, you get narrower and narrower in what you focus on. And then after school is where you get a lot of your practical training, working with athletes, working with other great coaches, mentors from the medical world. So I sort of sit in between the medical world, the research world, and the coaching and player world. And you sort of learn from all of them and try to then figure out how to communicate that to the different sectors. Because the medical world, most people who aren't medically trained can't communicate in that world because the language is a foreign language. The terms, the anatomical terms, the locations, things like that. So that's not fair to tell a player or a coach who doesn't have that training, that language. So I try to sort of sit in between and, I call myself now a translator or an interpreter because that's a lot of what I do is you do that from the medical world down, and then you also do that from the research world when you're talking about data and analytics and statistics and how do you summarize what's out there and make sense of that and then bring that information to the player or the coach that doesn't have that training either. So that's sort of how I got into it. And I still love working with athletes. So I spend, at least half my day training athletes still. And the other half is in the research world and working with companies on different products and research and development and stuff like that.
Yeah, awesome. Just incredible how much great work you've done, Mark. Let's see, Leslie, totally obsessed tennis coach. Yeah, referring to Peter there. Schwaz 22. Hi, Mark. I've really enjoyed your work and lessons. I'll be in the Atlanta area next month. Do you offer any programs at your institute for a recreational player? Thanks.
Yeah. So great question. We've had that request a lot. Usually we're not sort of open to the public. We come through referral of coaches, really. Every now and then we may do something, but it's usually through a referral from a coach. But our setup is mainly with pros and some of the top juniors. That's usually our main clientele. We try to do some events throughout the year for the adult player. We're actually going to do a camp in October in Atlanta specifically for that. So we're going to be sending some stuff out there to our email list in the next few weeks. So if you're not on our email list, get on that. It'll be limited to a small number of people. So it'll be a small, very personalized 3-day camp focused on tennis fitness and also a serving one. So we're going to have a combined one. But yeah, reach out to us directly and, we'll see what we can do though. So, but typically, no, we're so busy. Our waiting list is usually about 6 weeks or longer to get an appointment right now. So it's unfortunate. Wish we could help more people, but it's just pretty hectic, especially at certain times of the year.
Wow. That's why I'm so grateful that you've taken time today. I really appreciate it. Mark. Oh, actually, how do they get on your email list? What's the best site?
Yeah, just go to kovacsinstitute.com and there's a place there to sign up for the email list. So, and we have a weekly email that goes out aimed at players. So that email is really a lot of tips, videos, instruction, free education. And then we sort of send out our updates for any of the camps I do. I do one with Gigi Fernandez every year as well. We're doing that. We're doing a doubles summit. So if you're into doubles, that's always a great one. And then there's usually one or two other things I do for the adult player throughout the year as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I saw that newsletter. Let's put the website there real quick. Let's see. Back to the questions. Oh shoot! Now I lost my place. Oh, here we go. Verdell, what are some specific ways, and I think you'll really like the presentation that Mark has on Saturday that'll be released, but what are some specific ways to increase one's work capacity to play longer and stronger?
Yeah, so there's obviously train harder. That's the simple answer that no one loves to hear. Do a little bit more within reason. So figure out where you're the weakest, meaning can you run all day but you don't go very fast, or can you move pretty quickly but you sort of lose gas quickly and you feel pretty tired towards the end of matches? So if it's more the second one, then we've got to build up our endurance a little bit. So usually I say, and depending on the age and where you're at, lower impact environments, so biking, pool work, stuff like that is really good to cross train with, because you don't put extra strain on your knees and your back and things like that. You save that for the tennis court. And then you use your work to rest ratios, like we've talked about a 1 to 3 is ideal to try to build up that work capacity. So for every 10 seconds you work, 30 seconds of rest, and try to do that 20 to 30 minutes. If you can do that 3 or 4 times a week, that'll definitely help you in your work capacity perspective. There's also some different things you can take nutritionally and through supplements that may help a little bit. It won't change you completely, but there's things like beetroot juice. So that's one. That's a vasodilator. Inorganic nitrates is really what's the base core of it. And there's quite a few studies that have shown improved aerobic capacity by consuming that as part of your pre-workout routine. So there are little things like that can make a little bit of a difference. Obviously, it's not going to make up for not training, but if you're really looking to find little ways to help certain things, that's one way that could be beneficial. Making sure that you're taking carbohydrates and electrolytes throughout your activity and hydrating well is another. Many players don't realize how much they sweat when they play tennis. And after the second hour, you could have lost, quite a few pounds of body weight in fluid through sweating and respiration. So making sure you hydrate really well can actually help your performance and give you a bit more feeling of energy throughout the competition.
Yeah, definitely agree. So this one, I think we pretty much covered it. On top of recovery, is rolling a decent way to stimulate circulation. So I guess you mentioned like it does to some extent, but it also kind of like has like numbing properties. Like, was there anything else?
Yeah, so with foam rolling, for example, it's fine as a tool, as something else to do if it makes you feel good, but by itself, it's probably not the best use case. There's other use cases that could be better if you're trying to stimulate circulation. One is, ride a bike or go jog. That's actually a really good way to stimulate circulation, and it gets your entire body rather than one or two muscle groups. So depending on what you're trying to accomplish, there's probably slightly better, easier, quicker options than just foam rolling. Because if to do your whole body foam rolling, it's going to take you a good 10 minutes, 5 minutes to 10 minutes to do everything if you're really going to do that. And even then, it doesn't really raise your heart rate. So going for a light jog or a 5-minute bike ride, sort of to the courts or in the gym if the club has a fitness center. If you've got a jump rope, traveling with a jump rope is great. And, doing a couple minutes of jump rope gets the heart rate up, gets blood moving. So really the goal with circulation is how much blood can we move as quickly as possible.
Yeah, awesome. Alan, hi guys. Any recommendations as to how to increase swing speed?
Yeah, so depending on what we're trying to induce, so we do quite a bit of neuromuscular training, which is really what swing speed training is if you're talking about it from a nervous system standpoint. So you're trying to swing faster. Like in golf, for example, it's very common to use slightly heavier clubs and slightly lighter clubs, and you swing fast with both because it stimulates different responses from the nervous system. In tennis, we can do the same. So that's from a nervous system training standpoint. Then if you're trying to increase swing speed, the best way for the longest longevity, you actually want to get more rotation in your strokes. So you want to get better technique. So think about the hardest hitters. Most of the time, their swing speed is very fast, but they look effortless. That's what you're trying to accomplish. You're not trying to forcibly swing faster necessarily. You want it to swing faster, but you want it to come through efficient motor patterns, and you want to make sure that your biomechanics, your efficiency of your energy transfer is optimized. That's what we call rhythm. When people say they've got really good rhythm, that means they've got an efficient kinetic chain transfer of energy. And that's really what you want to accomplish when we're talking about how to increase swing speed.
Gotcha, Mark. Thanks. So, how much experience do you have, Dr. Kovacs, with like vegetarians and vegans? But J-Luke asks, how should a vegan or vegetarian eat to recover as fast as meat eaters?
Yeah, so I've done a lot with vegetarian athletes in female soccer players, in some baseball athletes. When I was working in the NBA, we had a couple vegan athletes. So it's pretty easy to accomplish what you need to. You just have to be a bit more diligent with preparing. And when you travel and things like that, you just got to make sure you go to the right places that you can get what you need. Typically, it's hard to do it with a traditional meal that you may get at a restaurant. It's hard to get 25 to 30 grams of protein in a traditional vegan meal most of the time, depending on if you can eat fish or not. If you can't eat fish, it's even harder. So if you're a true vegetarian and you can only eat vegetable sources, then you usually need to supplement with vegetarian protein powders, because it's the protein and the amino acids that are hard to come by in just a vegetarian sources. You can do it. It's not that it's impossible, but you have to eat a lot of stuff that you may not want to eat that much of to get the amounts of amino acids and protein, grams of protein that you want. So we usually recommend always having 1 to 2 vegan protein shakes per day. Sort of, at the end of your workout, have one with some carbohydrates in that. And then usually either at the end of the day at night, after dinner, to make sure that you've got some protein overnight for muscle repair and rebuilding. So there's definitely no issues with it. You just have to make sure that your protein sources are available and that you have stuff to travel with, whether they're vegan protein bars and vegan shakes that you can supplement your normal meals with, that you know that you're probably not going to get it just in food alone. It's really hard to do. It's doable, but you typically have trouble, especially if you don't like to eat a lot of calories.
Gotcha, Mark. And on that subject, I mean, I know you're not, I mean, probably you are. I mean, you know so much, but, I guess most people don't know you as like a diet nutrition like expert per se. But, I guess for people who maybe they're just like neutral, like they could eat like meat, or they could be a vegetarian, they could be vegan. I mean, is there one that you think is better than the other, or does it, I don't know, does it just depend on how you feel? Because I guess it seems like it's definitely tougher, when you're a vegan, especially to get what you need. So I don't know if you have if like an athlete just came up to you and said, hey, I mean, which one should I do? I mean, what would you tell them?
Yeah. So with that, the hard part with nutrition, and I've been involved in the nutrition world forever, it's one of the more difficult spaces because most people are doing it based on limited information. If you're not doing blood work and you're not doing genetic testing, you're guessing. And even with those two, we're still a bit limited because there's genetic, expressions that cause people to respond better to certain foods. That's why, when one person tries a certain diet, it works great for them, but then their friend tries it and it doesn't work as well.
Yeah.
There's usually genetic factors as to why that happens. So the people that respond really well to a high meat or carnivore diet do really well on that type of diet, but there's many people that if they eat a lot of red meat, they don't feel as well, they feel sluggish, things like that. So it's impossible for me to give a recommendation to someone without taking those two things into account normally. In general, it has much more to do with your macronutrient profile than even what source it comes from, meaning that we know we need a certain amount of carbohydrates in the diet, typically for energy. We know we need a certain amount of protein in the diet for muscle repair, enzyme function, and we need a lot of fat in the diet, for a lot of factors related to, joint health, enzymes, different things that relate to that. So we need to make sure that we're not restricting things too excessively without understanding the impact on it. So it's tough, and it's tough for people because everyone wants that answer. And people jump around left and right trying stuff because they do trial and error. And like you said, if it works for them, there's probably a genetic reason why that responds so well for them. So it's like, it's like gluten. Gluten was really a big deal a few years ago. It became popular. And very few people are truly gluten sensitive, and let alone celiac disease, which is very clear, but that's a very small percentage of people. So you have to be real careful with jumping on the nutrition or the diet of the month, I call it, because it literally is. Every month there's a new diet that comes out that people jump on. And, it usually works for some people. That's why they have fans of it, but it doesn't work for everyone. So you got to figure that out.
Yeah. Wow. You do know it all, Mark. Jeez. All right. Let's see. So we have a couple clay court questions. So I guess one here, I might actually try to combine it. We'll see. But so J-Look asks, I'm not a clay court player. Why and how do you need to slide? And then we also have another question next to it. Can it be learned as an adult? Which I would say yes. So I guess, feel free to tackle either of those.
Yeah, so if you're not a clay court player and you've never slid in your life and you're on hard court, don't start, because it's pretty hard to learn late, and there's no real benefit, especially if you're trying to learn late in life. So I wouldn't recommend trying to learn to slide on hard courts if you've never slid. So that would be the first suggestion. The second one, if you are playing on clay courts, you probably should learn to slide at some point if you've got mobility and some strength capacity to move reasonably well, because it can help you quite a lot. It can actually be a bit easier. You can slide into balls, which takes a little less effort. You take less steps. You can, if you do it right, you can hit your shot and recover sometimes a little bit quicker because you're sliding into the shot, and as you finish the stroke, you're able to immediately recover. So there's definitely some benefits to sliding. There may be some reasons why no one has taught you to slide. It could be because physically it may not be a benefit to you at this stage in your career. You have to sort of determine what's the value of learning something new. It's like, what's the value of teaching someone how to hit a kick serve? If you've never hit a kick serve and you're playing at a decent level and you've played for 40 years, is there a point in teaching you to hit a kick serve? There may not be. The time it takes you to learn it and get proficient in it may not provide enough of a benefit to justify that time. So ask yourself that question. If you've never slid before and you play at a level that you're comfortable with and you're healthy and you enjoy it, learning how to slide may actually not be a good thing for you. So without knowing you specifically, it's hard to say. But again, if you're younger and you want to get better at clay court tennis, it's pretty hard to play at a super high level without sliding at least some of the time. However, Andre Agassi pretty much won the French Open without really ever sliding.
Wow, I didn't actually realize that. That's crazy. I enjoy sliding myself. It's definitely helpful for me. Snowy, how could we best accelerate modifying any technique even after numerous steps and video monitoring in practice? The old techniques are sticky. Yeah, no doubt. Changing technique is very, very difficult in all sports. It's something that doesn't happen very often. Look at the pros. I mean, the pros some of them have pretty jacked up technique on certain things, and they know it, their coaches know it, and they try to fix it every now and then, but it's really hard to make major adjustments if you've been doing something for a long, long period of time. So pretty much the ways you need to do it is you need to do a lot of reps only the right way, which is really hard if you want to compete, because when you go into a competitive environment, you're going to go back to your old ways. So normally when you're making a major technical change, you usually have to dedicate a number of weeks or months of only hitting the new technique and without putting yourself in competitive environments where you may go back to that incorrect technique. And that's hard for many people to do. So if you truly are trying to make a major technical modification, you've got to force yourself into only hitting good reps. That may be a lot of ball machine work. That may be a lot of repetitions with video, and you're only hitting good reps. So that can get frustrating for people. And that's why many people don't stick with it, because you can make behavior change and you can modify technique pretty much, but you have to be willing to put the time in. And most people really aren't willing to put the time in to make that big of an adjustment.
Yeah, and really have to, start with the shadow swings and not just launch into, competitive environments. I mean, even something like, changing your serve technique, but then like going to a clinic or something, like unless you really mentally tell yourself, to commit, you're going to like revert back. So it's definitely taking it step by step is really helpful. Let's see here. I think we covered that one. This is an interesting one. Instead of changing racket strings, why not just hit less hard or more hard at the ball to adjust?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the level, for sure. Like at the highest levels, it's really hard to do that because you have to, swing out on balls. You have to basically play at your best against your competition or you're going to lose. But at different levels of the game, yeah, you definitely can adjust your swing length, swing speed, how much spin you put on the ball. No doubt about it. And, there's a lot of ways that people will adjust. Conditions as well. I mean, you've all played in the wind, so everyone does this subconsciously when they play in the wind. If you're hitting into a strong wind, you're going to swing a bit harder, hit a bit higher. When you're playing, against, the wind, with the wind at your back, you're going to have to take a little bit off because the ball's going to fly on you. So you definitely have that option for sure.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, let's get to an hour and a half, so I am going to take a couple more questions. I mean, we would legitimately have Mark here for like 4 hours if we kept going. So let's see. Alan, if you use a full Western grip, you will have wrist problems at some point. Look at Jack's sock. I guess so. Does the Western grip give more of a propensity for players to necessarily have wrist problems?
I mean, it doesn't necessarily. There's more, as we talked about previously, there's multiple factors in why you get wrist issues. But it definitely can, because you've got greater lag, and your swing speed has to be relatively quick to make contact with the ball effectively. So it definitely gives you higher likelihood. And, there's been a couple studies that have been done that has looked at likelihood ratios, and there is a higher likelihood with a Western grip than a, Eastern forehand or a semi-Western grip. So it's not incorrect that there's a higher likelihood. It doesn't mean everyone that uses a Western grip will get a wrist injury, but like a lot of things, there's a slightly higher likelihood. So in general, a full Western grip, is harder for most people to control. You can get more spin on the ball, but it is harder for most people to control. So that's why you don't see the Western grip being the predominant grip at the pro level. There's a handful of players that use it and use it successfully, but it's one of those things that it is harder to control. Semi-Western or an Eastern forehand grip is a lot easier to learn and control, and over time is probably more in the preferred option for most players.
Yeah, definitely, Mark. Definitely. Interesting question here. Do you have any experience with the pliability aspect of the TB12 program?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've been down. So that's for the folks that aren't familiar with it. So Tom Brady and his trainer for nearly a decade and a half, came out with their sort of training system probably about nearly a decade ago now. And so I've been down to Tampa, spent a day or two with the person that created it. And concept's got a lot of positives to it. So a lot of it's just about you're working with very light resistance at a relatively quick speed through the movements that are most similar to the activity. So if you're talking true sports-specific training, it's a form of it. So the positives of it is it's specific to what you're trying to train. You're working at a fast speed with some resistance. The benefit of what they do, if you go to their location, is they do some body work pre and post as well, which is one of the big benefits. They actually loosen you up. You get some treatment prior and after, which is probably the biggest benefit, honestly, of the program. And the challenge with it is you're not getting the strength gains that you need in most sports, because then you're not using really much resistance. And you're not necessarily getting that power production above and beyond the first few months, because there's not a lot of extra resistance. So, for certain environments, it can be very valuable as a component, but it's like a lot of training programs, it doesn't necessarily hit on everything. It gives you some really good benefits, but it's limited in other areas. So you probably want to look to add other components to it.
Got it. Thanks, Mark. And this is the last one. A little bit selfish for me to choose this one, but I have had experience with this. So my heels and back of my foot get sore after playing. I did some research and found that it might be plantar fasciitis. Should I go to a physio, or can I manage this myself?
Yeah, so dealt a lot with players that have had plantar fasciitis from mild cases, which this sounds like, if that is what it is, it's a relatively mild case, or very severe case to the point of plantar fascia rupture, which usually only happens if you're training in a pretty stupid way. Running on a treadmill barefoot, sprinting or something like that, or jumping up and down on boxes from high heights with no shoes on. Those are usually the ways you would get a plantar fascia rupture. But mild plantar fascia pain is really annoying. We know the folks that have had it, how much discomfort that causes. So there's a few things you can do yourself. Obviously, get a tennis ball and roll your bottom of your foot on it over it. Try to loosen up the fascia as much as possible. Anything that can heat that area up is really good. At night, you can sleep with a splint on your foot, which keeps your foot in sort of an elevated position, which puts that plantar fascia on stretch, which can help. So those are things you can do at home. Getting a lot of heat on that is also helpful as well for blood flow. So keeping as much blood flowing to the area. I use some electrical muscle stimulation devices down on the foot, which can really help keep blood moving through that area, because you get a lot of stagnant blood in your feet, especially when you sleep and if you're sitting a lot. So those are some things that you can sort of do at home. Going to a physio or someone with expertise in treating it, there are some things that we can use. SoftWave is a device. It's a very expensive device, so you have to sort of find the clinics that have them, but have had some good success with that, using that for plantar fasciitis. So it's a laser sort of treatment that you can do, say, once a week for a few weeks to help with it. There's a few other things that are out there. Shockwave therapy is another one that gets utilized sometimes for this. And then trying to loosen up the calf as much as possible through self-massage. Dry needling can help sometimes as well around the area. So there's definitely some techniques that you can utilize. But if you're not sure what it is, I'd definitely go to someone to get it diagnosed to make sure it is plantar fasciitis. It just could be heel pain. Your heel has like a fat pad at the back, and sometimes that gets bruised when you play a lot of tennis. And it could just be as simple as you bruise the base of your heel, and you may just need a little more cushioning in your shoe or something like that, and that may actually take care of it. But you definitely want to get it diagnosed to make sure you know what you're dealing with.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate it. It's been one heck of a session. A lot of people have enjoyed it so much here. And yeah, I just put in Dr. Kovacs' link as well if you're interested in getting the All Access Pass to support Mark, and get lifetime access to this session, all the sessions, and definitely highly encourage you to get it through that link that I put in there. That's linked to Mark. But Mark, again, thanks so much for your time. As you mentioned, you're constantly flooded with clients. I really appreciate it. And just any last words in terms of like what people should check out from you and like where they should go and things like that. I know I have CovacsInstitute.com here, but anything else you want to let them know about?
Yeah, so that's probably the easiest. You can find me at CovacsInstitute.com. We've also got our sort of educational membership site called CovacsAcademy.com. And we got about 1,000 hours of content on there from it's all searchable. So it's anything from technique to fitness training advice to webinars. Pretty much everything I do sort of ends up on there in different ways. So it's a really good way to get a lot of good information and easy to search location. So, follow us on Instagram at Kovacs Institute as well. So would love to keep in touch with everyone. And, really, again, want to thank you, Mervyn, for all the effort putting together the Tennis Summit again this year. It's such a great resource and so many great speakers. So privileged to be able to be involved again. And thanks for everything you do.
Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate it. Everybody check out CovacsInstitute.com and Instagram account as well, and Tennis Fitness Combine, great resource. Complete conditioning for tennis. I have that book as well, somewhere back there. So a lot of great stuff, Mark. So thank you so much. And thank everybody for attending. Great questions. Fantastic. So we'll see you on the next stream and have a great night. All right. I really hope you enjoyed this fun discussion with Dr. Mark Kovacs. A lot of great golden nuggets in there. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed re-listening to it, and I hope you did enjoy listening to it as well. If you did, then I would really appreciate it if you would leave a review for the show, and you can do that at tennisfiles.com/Apple Podcasts with an S at the end, or on your favorite podcast app of your choice that you use to listen to the show. I just find that Apple Podcasts is the biggest mover of the show in terms of its visibility and rankings and whatnot, which translates just to more people seeing it in general. So that is why I recommend Apple Podcasts. But, whichever one works for you works for me. I also would like to leave you with a quote, as I do at the end of every show. And this one is by Eleanor Roosevelt, a pretty famous person. And Eleanor said, "If life were predictable, it would cease to be life and be without flavor." It's very true. What if you won every single tennis match 0-0, or you knew what was going to happen? That's no fun. It's more fun to cause an upset and, win a close one you didn't think you would, things like that. So, yeah, I enjoy that quote and has a lot of great meaning there. So, with that, really appreciate you listening to the show. I look forward to bringing you more content in the future, obviously, and just let me know if there's a particular subject area that you want to listen to or learn about, and I will try my best to make that happen, whether it is immediately or, in a few weeks or months. We'll see. So, all right, all the best to you. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Tennis Files Podcast. This is your host, Mirabana Ranchad, signing out.